That's me there and talking about sprouting of Hinduism in UK and Europe. The territorial decoration I had for my 18 years in the British Army. So the British Army has been quite nice to me. I learned quite a lot, and that's the time when I decided to deep down and go for the studies of Bhagavad Gita, because that's the best book I could find for any strategy as such. I did my studies up to the age of about 30. So that was my brahmacharya ashram, if you like, before entering into the grihasthashram. I decided that I should start thinking in terms of some spiritual element in the life as well. And I learned some meditation a few years later when I thought it would be quite useful to go by that route. So if I start with the prayer, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kashit Dukkha Bhagavad. Let everybody be happy, let everybody be disease-free, let everybody do good things in life, and let us not hate each other. The last part is the one that is creating the most problems in the world at the moment, unfortunately. The scenario that I've used for this presentation is how the lotus flower sprouts in mud. So I'll go through that in that sequence as to the landmass. I've chosen UK and Europe because that is where I've been working for 45 years now. I talked about how the soil was prepared before my entrance into Europe from Bharat or India. Then how the seeds of spirituality were brought in that prepared soil, how these seeds were watered, how the fertilizers were used to help it, how the growth has taken place, how the trimming has taken place within that growth as well, and how's the future. So in my opinion, the future is still in our hands. It is bright. I can say I have probably continued with it for a long time. It's the younger generation that I would like to take on these tasks as quickly as possible under our guidance. And they're quite happy to do that. I can see that happening in our study groups and places like that. So next one, please. So the United Kingdom includes all the 4 countries, although Scotland is trying hard to gain its independence. It's still there. Europe, I've traveled these places and worked there in most of these countries that I mentioned from time to time. Although for a short period, my base was always UK and basically in England. I also, with the army, I went to Balkans in Kosovo. And Kosovo, I saw peacemaking force, the fighting that was going on between communities and the outside forces trying to bring in peace. And every time the forces were there was some peace. Every time they moved around or were withdrawn from some areas, there was a terrible situation there. The fighting erupted again. And that's what's happening in the rest of the world today. Armies are finding it difficult to control. They disappear from there. Classic example recently is Afghanistan. And most people, most analysts will tell you that we are heading into another disaster there. Next one, please. Now, the preparation of soil was to do with the First World War and Second World War. The whole Europe was in total chaos up to 1945-46. It was only after that it had to rebuild itself. But the preparation of that particular soil on the positive side was already made by people like Swami Vivekananda, who introduced Karma Yoga to the Western world. Swami Prabhupada introduced Bhakti Yoga to the Western world. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Dhyan Yoga. Chinmay Mission, Bhagavad Gita, through Bhagavad Gita, Dhyan Yoga. So these four main yogas were introduced by four great personalities. And I've been in contact with their literature, although never met anyone in person apart from Swami Chinmayanand in my medical school days. Then I looked at what happened in First World War, what happened in Second World War, and noticed that they were not just European wars. There were Gurkhas and Indians soldiers in the British Army. A lot of them died, and I thought I better remember them as well. And the best way to remember them is to join the army itself. So I joined the army, and I worked in the medical corps. I also witnessed some of the Indian Army personnel during my army career in India, Europe, and United Nations activities as well. Next one, please. So these were the seats that were brought into UK and Europe. The emigration taking place from India for studies mainly, but some of them for work as well. From Africa, mainly for work. Some businesses moved on, especially after the Uganda crisis. From West and East Indies as well. Indians and Hindus moved in. Majority of the Indians moved in were Hindus. And even if they were not Hindus, they were culturally Hindus. And therefore, it was quite easy to understand how these seeds were going to grow. Next one, please. Then we looked at the water. The water in Europe was very muddy through the world wars, as well as what was happening with the religious aspect of it. Religion was kept out of the state machinery. So there were sort of infighting going on that. Then the political movements like socialism came in, capitalism came in, the fights between them. All this was creating very muddy water. And that's where the Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, all the four Eastern religions, if you like, started growing in the form of a lotus. Obviously, in the mud, with all the currents and undercurrents there, it wasn't easy. But the challenges were met, and we now have very good combination of control, if you like, or more importantly, contribution to the communities. Next one, please. So we now have, festivities which are brought in, imported, if you like. For last so many years, London is celebrating Diwali, and it has become a very popular festival, the Festival of Lights. Quite recently, we had a whole day event, and it was well attended in spite of the COVID restrictions, and with well-disciplined audience in the Trafalgar Square. Similar events are taking place at different festivals as well. Next one, please. So what we have very prominently are our family units. Although the European individualism overshadows the family unit many times, we still have maintained our Hindu home, and the interactions are taking place quite nicely. The community, again, Hindu community is very much multi-faith oriented through teaching, through various concepts that we have. Bharat was not politically very strong in the past, but in last certainly 7-8 years, we have seen very strong political links with the rest of the world. I just heard this morning that one of the world's courts have appointed an Indian judge on it, beating the British competition in that for the first time. And this is all looking good. There are 3 major secretaries of state in the current Boris Johnson government in UK. And there are Indians in the European cabinets as well nowadays. Previous Prime Minister of Ireland was from Maharashtra state in India. And all this is bringing in a very new, good dimension to our communities as such, right to the top. We have Chancellor of Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, Priti Patel, Alok Sharma. All these 3 people are right at the top of the current government. And there are many others in the parliament as well. The world has seen this new order. And people have already predicted that this century is likely to be dominated by Hindu philosophy. So let's hope we can continue to contribute to that as well. From my childhood, I was very lucky to be associated with Sangha Parivar. Used to go to the RSS shakas, learned the discipline there, and that helped me in developing further in the British Army. And I would very strongly recommend to people who are spiritually inclined to make sure they have this self-defense. I did ask that question this morning about self-defense. And it's good to be a good bhakta, but at the same time, you have to be Arjun first. So develop your skills to be some kind of Arjun in your own field. And that means body-mind complex, well developed. At the same time, the spirituality then has a very good base on it. Next one, please. So the growth has taken place. The families have grown, some of them scattered, obviously, moving into another countries or moving places. Communities sometimes are divided, and that is where my focus has been in last few years, how to unite Hindu communities so that we can put forward whatever needs are to the government in UK as well as Europe. And we are succeeding quite a bit. All the misunderstandings of Hinduism are gradually being removed. Hindutva practices of yoga meditation, as we all know, have spread all over the world through the efforts of the Indian government, as well as through the efforts of yoga rishis like Ramdev Baba and many others, Sree Sree, as well in that. Sociological, we have a very good status compared to all other communities. Hindus are considered very high up sociologically. Technologically, the IT department is heavily dominated by our people. Economic, obviously, the richest community in this country, as well as in US, I believe. Political power is still very limited, but we are working on it. Next one, please. So there are lots of positive things in the service sector, lots of doctors and pharmacists doing well. That brings me to the COVID situation, which has challenged it, but we have survived it. I have actually treated a few COVID patients myself, although I work now mostly in non-COVID situations because of the introduction of the rules in the sector. I encourage people to take their vaccinations, make sure they are safe for treating other people, and encourage other people to take their vaccinations as well. So we have learned through this destruction of COVID, we have learned quite a lot. And not only learned it, but put it in practice straight away. Creative ideas came up, PPE was used, making sure that everybody is wearing masks. safe practices were introduced. Some of the old medicines have come back into practice again, like dexamethasone. And the pharmacists are doing a great job helping with the immunizations as well. So vaccinations. Business
Sir,
sector.
request for a few more minutes.
Yeah.
We'll have a question answers from your side.
Sure,
we wish
sure.
to hear from you.
Yep.
From that question answer type.
So I'll skip the rest of the slide. As you can see,
Yes,
there
sir.
are lots of NGOs who are helping in disasters in not only
My
India,
request, you
but
can
also
make the
Southeast.
slide. We can see self-explanatory one.
Yep. Next
Yep.
one, please.
Fantastic.
There are negatives, obviously, and we are working on those. It's the phrase that comes to mind is tamasoma jyotirgamaya. Let us move from darkness to light. Next one, please. I will skip the Human Rights Act. This is all over the world now. We are talking about human rights, but there are a few things in that which are quite important to make sure that we take our responsibilities seriously, don't just fight for the rights, take the responsibilities as well. And as far as I can make out, the future is very bright. We still have a lot of confused Arjuns amongst us, but with the help of Bhagavad Gita, we should be able to sort those out. Now, I have some very positive suggestions to make to this conference. It's nice to have once a year conference like this, and maybe another one or two that we can attend online.
Fantastic.
But at the same time, I have been emphasizing for last 30 years now that we should have proper weekly study groups where people can sit down for 1 hour a week in their family groups, wider family, in the community, at the temples, whatever place we can, community halls. We sit down for an hour just dedicated to Bhagavad Gita. And we have noticed a big change in our local community here at the temple. And it's spreading quite promisingly up and down the country. And there are some study groups coming up as well. This Gita Parivar started a very good activity. Their motto is Gita Padho Padhao aur Jeevan mein lao.
Fantastic.
Understand and bring it. And they developed some very fantastic online courses, which are, I've just done my first certificate with them, which is Gita Gunjan, based on chapter 12 and 15. And there are lots of things happening. There are benefits of this lockdown that we had and the COVID situation and long COVID, which has given us lessons on spirituality, put brakes on
Fantastic
enjoyments and vasana in life, and lots of things are happening. But we need to look after our body, mind, and spirit, all three of them. So I'll be happy to answer questions on that.